said 9 books you've written, and that is quite a lot. I know plenty of writers out there that would even dream about publishing a single book. And to see the number 9 books, that feels like such a big gap. What is your experience with this?
Well, that first book was indeed, that was something that was just, it felt so far away from me, even though I've always felt that I was a writer at heart. For the longest time, I did not know what to write about. And then only when I started my coaching business in 2003, that's when I realized this is what I want to write about. The things that I talk about with people, the things that we work on. So that's going to be my first book. So I knew that then, but the idea of actually writing a book and then getting it out in the world, especially that step, that just scared me shitless. And so I had to build up to that by writing blogs. That scared me shitless as well. And I still remember the really physical fear of the idea of putting a book out. And so that was a lot. So for everyone who's watching this and who is, still feeling like they're gathering courage to write a book, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. But then, the writing itself actually went very smooth. And that was that. I published the first book and I already had the idea for my second book. And then that again was like years. It took years, so many years. And I rewrote that second book like 8 times, I think, and actually finished it. For 7 or 8 times, I had a finished book. And I looked at it, but then so much had changed in my business and in myself by the time the book was finished that it just didn't do justice to what I was doing, who I was working with. So I threw it out 8 times. And that really took a toll on my confidence and on my trust in myself as a writer, because it just felt so weird. For so many times I wrote in my newsletter, yeah, the new book is almost here. And then, oh no, I threw it out again. And, so that was not fun. But then after that book finally came through in a really short amount of time, the next couple of books came through. And then, that was still work, creating the outline, thinking about who's going to read it. What do they need to know about this topic so that they will understand what I try to tell them? So it was still very much the person doing the writing. And then for my last 2 books, by then a lot had shifted in me. I realized that I'm not the separate person going through life the way most of us see ourselves. But I realized, yeah, no, it's all life playing me and writing the books. And once you see that, writing books becomes just like taking a sip of tea or taking a walk or doing the dishes. It just happens. And that makes a difference.
Effortless happening and it taking
Yes.
place by itself. I also kind of thought you said that was the case for your first book. Definitely not a second, but your first book. It felt effortless, and you also knew I'm a writer by heart.
Yes.
And I'm a born writer. And I guess there are plenty of writers out there who don't feel that way. I'm one of them also. Yet books keep coming, and or even just desire for it.
Yeah.
So how would you rhyme that?
I think it's just a different way life shows up as. It's just the way life works through you, where you never had the idea that you would be a writer or that you would write books, and still it's happening. And for me, I did always have the feeling that I was a writer and that I was going to publish a lot of books. It just a sense that would happen, but that's just a different story. And the essence remains the same. You're not the one writing. I'm not the one writing. The books simply appear through us. And it's just the story around it that's different. And I think that's what keeps life interesting. All these different stories, all these different roles.
It's still funny that we keep letting it evolve around the writer, around us, really. So it's about getting that book out there and getting more inspiration and getting unstuck and all these things, and about me, whereas we don't leave ample space for the book to actually come to the surface by doing so.
Yes.
How would you because you kind of see a distinction between your first 7 books and the two books that came after, more non-dual inspired, if you will. So
Yes.
how would you elaborate on that? Because a distinction on itself can also be kind of contradicting, as in any kind of book, in any kind of way, is of course how life's taking expression through you. So in a way, it is always non-dual, one could say.
Yes, true. Absolutely. There is only non-duality in reality. I mean, that's all there is. Well, I make the distinction for very practical reasons, because the first 7 books are really more like transformational coaching type of books. And it's the same as like, I love reading thrillers. I love it. That those are the main books I read. And then, let's say that really enjoy reading books by Minette Walters, which actually I do. And so I'm used to her writing a certain type of book. So when I see that she has a new book, I have this image in my mind of what it's going to be. And I know that that is the book that I want to read. When I purchase it and all of a sudden she decided well, she didn't decide, but you know what I mean. All of a sudden she wrote not a thriller, but she wrote some kind of like romantic story, I would be disappointed and I don't want to read the book. I'm just not interested in it. Not because there's something wrong with the book, but it's just not the book that I wanted to read. And that's the only reason I make a distinction between those first 7 books and the 2 that followed later, just simply so that people know they are different. And I know that some of the people who read my first books, they are on a similar path. And when they read my recent books, they're like, yeah, this is what I resonate with. There are also people who don't resonate, but who may think they do because they are used to my previous books. And just so they know. And at the same time, who cares? It doesn't matter. And the books will attract the readers that are supposed to read them, and it's none of my business. So it's both. Both are true, I think. So what's your take on that?
I have a slightly different experience with, because I fully understand the distinction you make purely for practical reasons, for
Yeah.
people to know before they read a book, expectation management, basically.
Yes.
For me, already the first book I've written was kind of Nando inspired already. That was the whole reason I felt the urge to write.
Yes.
To kind of give it a place. Like, so many things were happening and moving, and I had to write it down. And at some point, it had enough substance to actually also publish it. So I thought, well, why not also do that as well? So, and from one book, another came and another, and that's how it goes, as you well know. So kind of the phase before that, I'm less familiar with it, at least in a different way, as in, we could even say that when you're writing, you might be reading. You might be reading your own book, for example, very actively. And then actually the other way should also hold some kind of truth in it. Whereas if you start reading something, you're also writing it. So all the books you have been reading, those are all the books you've almost co-authored in a way, because you are interpreting it in different ways. So you're giving life in it, and there are different movements going on. And from that perspective, I would say that kind of phase, the before non-dual inspired writing, is also familiar to me, but more in the form of reading other people's work, which is maybe even necessary to go through these phases, whereas even thinking in phases don't make any more sense than, we are talking about this stuff from this kind of perspective, from the non-dual kind of perspective, let's say.
Yes, absolutely. And that is something that I've seen so many times, where people said to me, I love that you were talking about that in your book. And I was like, I don't think I talked about that, which is cool, because as you say, when you reading a book is like writing it. You experience your own version of the book. There's no such thing as the book that came through you or that came through me. It's a different book for each reader. And that's one of the things that used to scare me years ago with that first book, because I felt that I wanted to make sure that everyone got from the book what I put in. I had a purpose with it. I had an ambition with it, and there was something that I wanted to give the reader. So there was something that felt very important at the time, to make sure that I wrote in a way so that the reader could take from it what I intended them to take from it, which is of course total bullshit. But back then there was really something that weighed on me. And then at some point, I just realized that it was impossible to write something that everyone would interpret the same way. And I also realized that it wasn't important. And now it's something that I think is fascinating. It's the same with the world, right? There's not one world. I mean, how many people are there? 6 billion or something? There are 6 billion worlds. And we all experience it from in a very different way. And we all see something so different when we look at the world. There's not just one reality, and at the same time, there is only one reality. And I think that's just fascinating, you know? I really enjoy that.
In a way, the moment we publish a single book, we actually publish 6 billion books
Yeah.
because, of course, anybody is capable of reading it.
Yeah.
Most of them. So yeah, that's funny to view it as such.
Yeah.
And do you feel like sometimes playing with the idea of the one not being an author, play almost philosophically with these ideas, with these typical associations people tend to get while thinking about what it means to write and publish a book?
Not consciously, but it happens. And it's impossible for it to not happen, because the moment the non-dual path kind of finds you, everything becomes a paradox. So do I play with it? Well, it's impossible not to. But as I said, I don't consciously play with it. What I try to do, which is here, paradox again. I'm saying what I try to do, knowing full well that there is no me trying anything. But for practical purposes, to have this conversation and to make life, to keep it practical and grounded, I still say, well, what I am playing with or what I am conscious of, so there's the paradox already. And this is not something you asked, but this is something that just comes up now. I remember years ago, I read a book, and I won't mention the title because this is not about, dissing someone or whatever. And I liked the book. I really did like it. But it was written by someone who claimed to be, liberated and totally awake and enlightened. And he wrote, it was just almost unreadable, because he was trying to do justice to the non-dual perspective in every sentence he wrote. So he avoided the word I, he avoided the word you. It just became this huge ball of words. And you had to really, as a reader, you had to really work in a way to see what it was he actually wanted to say. And he also wrote about it in that way, like, yeah, well, I live in this, and these are my words, but that's kind of what I took away from it, where he said, yeah, I'm kind of living in this enlightened bubble above the rest of you people. But in order to write this book, I just came down from my throne to be amongst you, the peasants, so that I could write this book for you, because I have so much to share that you will love and that will be so interesting for you. So here we go. And again, I love the book, and it's just what was and what is, and that's fine. But I do remember that in that moment, I thought to myself, wow, I'm not ever going to do that. That's so not me. So I was totally judging it back then. Maybe still tiny little bit right now. But I do always try to find ways to ground non-duality in just, the dirt of human life. And that's why my most recent book is about money, because that's, a topic that you can think everything about non-dualism. You can experience that you are one with everything and that there's no boundary between inner and outer, whatever. And then you need to pay a bill and the money is not in your bank account. And that, for many people, including me, is a moment where all of a sudden you are totally identified with being a person, managing life and doing things and getting things, that just instantly comes up again. Because those are the moments, mundane topics or moments where human life can just feel hard or can feel like a struggle. Those are the moments where you can start grasping and clinging. Those are also the moments that are a doorway to experiencing that oneness and that, the whole non-dual thing, where it can become practical, where it can become something that you actually experience. And that is something that I don't do it, but I do. Did I make any sense at all, Youri? Because this just
Counts for anything here, right? What we were saying and sharing, and especially Brigitte, when we are talking about non-dual related stuff, it is sometimes almost funny to me how complex we can all make it and all the extra layers we want to add. Whereas, sure, if it gives us satisfaction to do so, or not even satisfaction, but we find ourselves doing it for whatever reason, then that is taking place. And then there are plenty of books which can actually go with you and guide that exploration through understanding life from all these non-dual standpoints. Whereas really it is, to combine it and go into the dirt, what you mentioned, while also maybe even peaceful perspective, as in, okay, it is fine, it is taking place, and these ideas of oneness and wholeness intertwined into that, which kind of is practical and soothing at the same time. And I think that is pretty interesting because there are so many also philosophical books about this topic. And sure, you can have all these thought experiments and it can surely be fun to play with that, especially if you're a very philosophical oriented person. But then again, what you say, now there are bills to pay. There are, challenges in life, earthly matters going and coming on your way, which requires some sort of attention. And then it is almost a pity to just remove them through non-dual statements, as in, who am I to give any attention on that obstacle? What kind of obstacle is that? Because it already includes like all these weird, stupid ideas. Whereas we can also just say, maybe the most non-dual way is just to be fully and purely dualistic in this moment regarding this matter. And that's fine.
yeah.
That's totally fine.
That's beautiful. And it goes for your work as well, of course. Your work is a paradox in itself, like mine, but yours as well, because what you help people with, I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're helping people see that they're not the writer and that once they see it, the book comes through. And yet you are helping them see that, that they are not a writer so that the book can come through. So there are so many paradoxes there. And yet it's happening. It is what it is. And it's what is so helpful for people and what they need in the moment. So yeah, that's beautiful.
And then in a way, it could even be interesting to view it all as some kind of mirrors, and you're speaking to yourself. And even if you are making use of a book mentor or you're reading a book, doesn't matter whether it is people or stuff, you're making use of resources. It is all reflections of you talking to yourself and you giving yourself these reminders. And I think that is so interesting, so beautiful.
Yes, it is. And I think a very beautiful part of that is also that in your case, as a book mentor, I think I heard you call yourself, that you don't put yourself above your client thinking, I'm the one who knows and I'm going to teach you something that you don't know because I'm further along or whatever. But when you say, well, this is life speaking with itself and we are each other's mirror, then it's so much more connected and so much more loving and so much more equal. And I think that that's beautiful too.
Yeah, I think even kind of what you pointed out, some people might have the impression, they are further. Even the example you gave with the book you read from the so-called enlightened person, horrible, but still, it happens and it exists.
Yes.
And I also see it quite often, even people who are familiar with all these kind of oriented terms and ideas, and they like to play with it. But then as soon as they read something online, let's say they see it in their feed and they really feel the need to kind of comment under it, to kind of show that person how it actually is. Like, you're seeing it wrong because this, and there is no you, there is no self, and there is no, so your post doesn't make any sense. And I've heard plenty of these instances. I didn't experience it too much in my situation, because I don't feel like writing about non-duality on itself. But interesting for me to see, though.
Yes. Yeah. And again, that's just what happens. That's just what is in that moment. Whenever I see something like that, that's, to me, is reflecting my own ego or my own judgment in that moment, because even when I think, oh yeah, well, your comment totally comes from ego. Who's saying that? My
Exactly.
ego.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what? I mean, I think that that's another thing that is important to me, to just be authentic or honest about that, at least to yourself, to not pretend that, you have zero ego or zero attachment to whatever kind of identity.
Or even more subtle, that you think you've seen it a little bit more. It's a
Exactly.
little bit later.
Exactly. The enlightened identity. Oh, I see it now. That too is an identity. And that's fine. It doesn't have to go away. There's nothing wrong with it. Just see it, just see it. And just this morning, because that's how it happens with writing for me. And I would love to know how it happens for you after that. Suddenly there's just, I don't know, just like, how do you know that you want to take a sip of tea? You just take it. How do you know you want to write? You're writing, So I was writing, yada, yada, yada. And it was about how I used to really want to grow my business and how I don't want to grow it anymore. But as that sentence appeared on my screen, I felt something in me flinch, like, really? We really don't want that anymore? And so I typed in parentheses, I typed the sentence underneath it. My ego flinched just a little typing this. And I left that sentence in because that's true. That's what happened. I'm not going to pretend that that didn't happen. Not that there's anything wrong with either of it. It happens or it doesn't. There's a flinching of the ego or there isn't. It's not important. Who cares? It's just what is. But it did happen, and I did type it, and I leave it in. I could also think, well, I'm writing about all this oneness stuff, and that there's no me, and so I should take it out because now, whatever. No.
It's not professional. It's not,
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever. It's what is. And another time you can read one of my pieces and there's none of that. And then you, the reader, may think, she probably never has that anymore. Yeah, I do. But it just didn't show up while I was reading that piece, So, but that's, I do it. And if other people do it differently, well, fine, whatever. Just you do you. Now tell me about your writing. What's that like? Is it, as I described for me, that how do you know that there's something you want to write, you're writing? Is it like that for you as well?
Possibly, yeah, of course. Then I think I see myself writing. Maybe I think about it, and then maybe even overthink it, and then maybe even disturb the process, and distract myself while doing so. So definitely, I guess it's inevitable. And I also guess that once we can kind of invite that, include that so much that it becomes part of the whole writing, and actually even absorb all the distractions, at least what you would label as distractions, the writing becomes so much more rich, so much more valuable also for people to read. How amazing is to read, well, my ego flinched a little bit, with that sentence I just wrote. And then you have that kind of recognition as a reader, possibly, not all of them, some of them, which might be so beautiful to read because people are not used to that. So definitely familiar, yeah.
And you say, I heard you use the word inviting. Do you see writing as something that you can invite? Where you're like, I think I want to write something now, so let's invite inspiration, or is that something you do, or is that how you see it? Or
it's funny. I guess, of course, I would say both. On the surface, I could see myself sitting down like in an hour from now and saying, okay, let's write something. And then, sure, you might even draw the conclusion, well, isn't that forced? Because writing takes place whenever it takes place. And there's no you who decides. Whereas still, on the surface, it is being experienced as such.
Yes.
And then I see that is happening. And at the same time, that is happening with the inspiration that comes through to write. So then, of course, if I would say, well, that is because I decided to do so, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It happened simultaneously, sure, but it's not the cause. So that's how I would view that. Yeah.
Years ago, I had a different view, and that's even one of my previous books. It's called something like Write a Book in 3 months in only 30 minutes per day or something like that. And back then, that's how I experienced writing at that point in time. I noticed that I could just sit down, set a timer for 30 minutes, and then just write for 30 minutes. No thinking, no overthinking, no editing, just that. And then in doing so, and it is kind of similar to, getting out of the way and letting come through what wants to come through. It's just more planned and focused and with the timer. But I did view it back then as like I'm here and inspiration is somewhere out there. And if I make space for inspiration to come and I create the space by sitting down and setting a timer, then it just flows. And then the inspiration comes and you're writing, and then in 3 months you have a book. And now I no longer see it as I'm here, inspiration is there, and I need to do something to receive that inspiration, whatever it is. It's just what happens, which can still look like setting a timer and sitting down at a specific time. It can still look like that. But the difference is whether you see that as your personal doing or whether you see that as happening. That's the difference. And that's a huge difference, because in the first instance, when you see yourself as doing it, there's always the tiniest bit of tension and of pressure and of having to perform. And when you don't see yourself as doing it, you're still doing the exact same thing. You're sitting down, you're setting a timer, you type, but it just flows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And yeah.
It's beautiful that we share that view, hopefully, you say?
Hopefully people who are watching this sense what we are talking about. You don't have to understand it, but perhaps you can sense it. And if not, well, then not. That's fine too.
Exactly that. Because even this idea could give you the belief that it should come effortless then. And that it should, form new ideas about it. Whereas the whole point is just be relaxed about these ideas. Whether that is a typical writer's belief, which might be quite limiting, doesn't matter. Well, that is taking place then. And that is actually even maybe for you at the moment, a source of inspiration. So let's embrace that.
Yes. And you know what's also, and you are sort of pointing to that, it's also important for people who are watching this to realize, what do you think effortlessness means? Because effortlessness does not necessarily mean that there's no effort. There can still be effort. There can still be something that you would describe as perhaps writer's block or whatever, Again, the difference is when that happens, when you think you should be writing a book now and you're not doing it, are you labeling that as a problem? Are you seeing that as something that is wrong because it should be effortless or it should be happening now? Or are you seeing it and you see, well, apparently writing is not happening now. And then there is still something that perhaps someone else would call stuck or writer's block. But for you, it's effortless, And for example, I think a week ago or so, the idea for a book came through with just the outline, the chapters, the working title, everything. It only needs to be written. If I sit down, I can write it in 2 days. And I know that because that's how it happened with my last book. That was from outline to finished first draft in 2 days. But this time, the idea came, the outline, the chapters, everything. So the mind was like, oh, looks like we're going to have another book tomorrow night this time, because this is how it happened last time. And I just watched the thought. And now we're, it's like a week and a half later, nothing happened. A couple of years ago, I would have thought that I should be writing the book now because the outline is there and it only needs to be written. So why aren't you doing it? And now it's like, oh yeah, well, there's an outline. No writing is happening. Okay, maybe it will be a book. Maybe it won't. Maybe it will get published. Maybe it won't. We'll see. I don't know. And that's the difference. So even though I'm not writing that book right now, it's still effortless.
And I guess with this, um, anybody listening to this could get the impression that when we start talking about years ago, I would have thought, this and that, or when we introduce the term effortless, that means that there must be such thing, like a kind of as the opposite of effort. And then we play with it, we call it effortless effort, or to integrate the paradox in it. But then still, it keeps almost feeding into the idea that something has to change and you have to acquire a new mentality, new skills, new this. With all of that, we can just also relax and think none of that is needed. The book is already here. The book is available. And the moment you start listening to it and see that you see yourself moving with it, then it comes alive and it unfolds. And that's so beautiful to witness.
Yes.
And I think that can be kind of a relief also to just know that. Even that knowing is not necessary.
Yes. And you are pointing out something really important that, where people, whether it's about writing a book or something else. And when I say people, I mean me as well, because we've all been conditioned in the same way. So let's say that we so often believe that what is here right now is not enough. Something needs to be added. Something needs to be added to this moment, or to our book, or to our business or career, or the role we play. It's not enough, and we are not enough. The whole coaching industry is built on those beliefs, The whole world is built on those beliefs, not just the coaching industry. And it's just not true. And that doesn't mean that maybe you won't learn things. Sure, learning can happen, but not because something is wrong with what you know or are or have in this moment.
This is so crucial, huh? I feel very triggered with this topic, as in it is hard for me still to see that there could be a dynamic going on, whereas there's somebody, a teacher and a follower, that kind of dynamic I'm talking about. Whereas, sure, for certain fields that has its place, but when we are talking about life, then it becomes a little bit more tricky and scary, dangerous almost. As in, who is the other person to know better what life is about and what you should be doing than you yourself? And sure, it might be a mirror. So you use that teacher, if you would view it as such, to get information about what is the next step and, contemplate about life if you feel drawn to that. But it's so important almost for me to kind of break through that, because that dynamic, I don't like it.
Yeah. Amen.
It's also the reason why, let's say, for my third book, called it the Place, a life-changing title here, as in kind of a placeholder. And I left that as the title, kind of to make it almost, I give a wink to, like, you always come across these books with titles which seem to be transformative, and you get more harmony, you get more peace, you feel more ecstatic, you get more freedom, you get, no. It's okay to not fix anything here, see what's already going on, and celebrate how beautiful that could be. Even the painful parts. Doesn't mean that we have to draw the conclusion, okay, so we shouldn't work on it. If that is what life does at the moment, that is what's taking place.
That's one of the reasons why I feel really relieved, maybe is the word, and also not. But I'm going to stick with relief because no better word comes up. I used to be a real self-improvement, personal growth junkie, totally. And I loved it, loved it for all the insights and the breakthroughs and the wow. And the downside was that underneath it, it wasn't only driven by that genuine love for breakthroughs and insights and new territories within yourself, that you can, wow, so cool. That was just part of it. But a very big driver was the really deep belief that there was something wrong with me, that I was not good enough yet, and that something needed to be added, and also some things perhaps taken out before I would finally be the best version of myself. And I was fully aware that I believed that, but I didn't question it. I thought that it was normal. And especially when you work as a coach and you are in that world, of course it's normal. It's how you make your living. You help other people work on themselves and become a better version of themselves. And that's what you yourself are continuously doing as well.
And
You
it's
know?
you see that it's so sneaky that it can also move into the next thing, which is, and it's all about self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion, still evolving around the self.
Yes.
And that is so tricky. We see it less, but it is doing the same thing, but
Yeah.
it has a more loving, seemingly, character,
Yeah.
but it's still the same violence it carries.
Yes. And the interesting thing is that and I don't like this expression, but again, I don't know a better one, when the non-dual path found me, you know what I mean? I took that thinking into that as well at first. Thinking, if only I could be aware longer stretches of time, if only I was more present, then I would reach whatever faster. Still thinking that there was something to improve, still thinking that there was a better way to do what I was already doing, still thinking that there was some place where you could arrive, still thinking that it was me doing it, all of that. But now it seemed like a milder version of it. So I didn't see that at first. And there's nothing wrong with any of this. So if people hear this and they recognize themselves and they're like, oh, crap. No, it's just what happens. It's fine. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong with you. You don't have to now think, oh, I should stop doing that, because that is still that trap.
And that's why it's nice that you say still a milder form might take place. And it's always taking place. That's just human nature. And it just doesn't magically disappear.
Nope.
It takes on different forms. And then, sure, it might be a matter of noticing it, and that you can be more playful about it and not so tentative. It's okay. You see it and it happens, and then you laugh a little bit about it or not. But it is taking place. And even the new idea, then it is no longer about becoming more aware and stressing the kind of experience of oneness. But then after that, you see, okay, it's not an experience. It's always there. And then that is your new thing, to kind of, from that standpoint, or see all these things from that view. Whereas it's exactly the same. And it might only get more subtle, so maybe even harder for us to recognize. Maybe even the, let's say, non-dual people could have it the strongest because it is less obvious.
Yes.
But less obvious on the surface is more present underneath.
Yes.
So then you can just take that more lightly, speak about it, say that it's present within all of us. It is, I think, also a relief for all of us, including ourselves.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It keeps coming back to what you said before, nothing needs to be fixed. This is it. And it's fine. And you said, well, maybe you can celebrate it and that's fine. But if you feel, I'm not celebrating it because right now everything is just shit. Sure. Then that's what is. And you don't have to celebrate and you don't live in eternal bliss. And maybe some people do. I don't know. That's their experience. That's not my experience. And that's fine. It's just what is. And when you start to see that more and more, there is, at least that's my experience. I'm curious to hear your experience. There is just this level of peace and freedom that's just always there. Even when, there's whatever, stress or worry or something shitty happening, then that's there. And there's the seeing of it and the seeing that that's not who you are and the finding peace in that simultaneously. Is that your experience as well?
Definitely, yes. If you're almost being carried by something, whereas while you're being carried, all things can happen. Life can really feel difficult and struggling at some time. But I think indeed with that idea that it is fine and it has its place, and you don't have to run away from that as well. That is again freeing. And maybe even these things, these struggles, might be all reminders to that, because through them, it becomes so clear that that is the case.
Yeah.
And without them, it might even at some point become a little boring because you're not fully experiencing the richness of what life could be. So definitely, yeah.
Yeah. This is it.
Yeah, this is it, yeah. With or without book,
Absolutely.
because the book is there already anyway.
Yeah. True.
All carrying a book, whereas some people feel to indeed give expression to that, and others don't, or not at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, relaxing thought.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just whatever is, and there's no need to look ahead or whatever
Yeah.
unless that happens. But this is enough.
And of course, I could lean to the approach of, okay, it is all fine. And if it takes place, well, that's how it is. And I know that there are skeptics around that view because they would view it as a view. They give it a certain frame, the frame of, okay, it is always fine as it is. Whereas it is not meant as a conclusion.
Yeah.
It's not meant as, okay, and because of this, then I should behave differently. Or no, it flows in between and beyond. And you can't really grab it. And at the same time, you already do. So, and that's why it's always fun also to work with the paradoxical nature of life, just to play with that view we might have about life and how it can be and experienced also, to kind of provoke that sometimes and show that indeed what we started with, there are so many different worlds, and it can be refreshing to sometimes swap worlds and see yourself through others, and through others you're getting back of seeing yourself even more clearly. And I think all these dynamics going on is such a wealth.
Yeah. And that's why I love books, because each book to me is a world in itself. And every time I read a book, I'm temporarily in a different world. And when I write a book, I'm temporarily in a different world as well. And it's still this world and no world and everything in between. But that's what I love the most about books.
So many worlds, yeah.